Earth is our home, habitat, and the origin of everything on the Earth.
Include human.
This is the worst drought to hit South Africa since 1982.
The National Weather Service has called this a once-in-a-thousand-year storm.
Washington State is having its worst fire season ever.
The city is now facing an unprecedented flood event.
This one, they're saying, is the worst one yet.
Extreme weathers are becoming more frequent, putting lives at risk. Ice sheets, such as Greenland and Antarctica, are melting, causing sea levels to rise, and spills out of the ocean, flooding the coastal region. A higher sea level will cause the disappearance of large land areas, or soil erosion, and threatening farmland, housing, or recreation areas, causing the loss of habitat. People will be forced to abandon their homes and move to another area. From heat waves to extreme hurricane, from heavy flood to longer and frequent drought. Growing crops is becoming difficult, the areas for plants and animals to live shift, and the water supply is diminishing. Okay, enough. We all have seen this all day everywhere, on TV, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere. Why are these happening? These are the symptoms, and at the same time, the effects of climate change.
Global warming is real. It's caused by us, and it represents a threat. We have to do something about it, or we will face dangerous and irreversible changes.
A study that came out, the scientists are telling us that human beings are causing global warming, and that's happening because we're burning dangerous fuels like oil, gas, and coal.
They're now well over 90% saying that human activity is responsible for the preponderance of this.
The global temperature rises for 1.7 Fahrenheit since 1880. Seems like a little, but the heat from human emissions is like 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombing across the planet every single day. Human activity is causing the climate to change. The CO2 emissions from cars, our industries, and power plant are heating the planet. The main causes are the greenhouse effect. Gases in the atmosphere let the sunlight in, but prevent the heat from escaping. The rapid increase in the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere had warmed up the Earth's temperature at an alarming rate. Earth temperature had been fluctuating in the past, but atmospheric carbon dioxide hasn't been reached in the past 100,000 years. If these do not give you enough reasons to believe that human activities have a great impact on climate change, look at the world today. India, London, Los Angeles. The same goes for the CO2 emission in these countries, from drastically dropping the emissions to gradually increasing after the quarantine ends. So what did humans actually do something about climate change? Let's start with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, where all these treaties started. UNFCCC or FCCC is an international environmental treaty, negotiated at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED, informally known as the Earth Summit, held in Rio from 3 to the 14th of June 1992. Today, it has near universal membership with 197 countries that have ratified the convention, called parties to the convention. There are several main objectives in UNFCCC. 1. Set a lofty, but specific goal without an enforcement mechanism. 2. Keeps tabs on the problem, and what's being done by the industrialized countries on climate change issues. 3. Puts the onus on developed countries to lead the way in tackling climate change. 4. Charts the beginnings of a path to strike a delicate balance between environment and economic. 5. Directs new funds to climate change activities in developing countries.
The problem that we're trying to solve with blended finance is basically for the private sector to participate in investment to protect the environment.
In 1992, UN conferences held in Rio resulted in UNFCCC. In 1997, the first international treaty, Kyoto Protocol, is adopted in Japan. In 1998, 160 nations meet to create the Buenos Aires Action Plan at Buenos Aires, Argentina. On Saturday, December 19, 2009, in Copenhagen, the vast majority of countries signaled their support for the Copenhagen Accord, a 12-paragraph framework hammered out by a group of world leaders in a marathon series of closed-room sessions. In 2010, Cancun Agreements, which is a critical step toward an effective compact to fight global warming, is made in Cancun, Mexico. In 2016, at the COP21 Sustainable Development Summit, held in Paris, all UNFCCC participants sign the Paris Agreement, effectively replacing the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol, as the first ever international treaty, was developed in UNFCCC on December 1997, and enforced in the year of 2005, in which 192 parties participated in this agreement. The protocol focused on the reduction of greenhouse gases emissions in the atmosphere. In this protocol, the gases that were under monitored are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons and sulfur hexafluoride. The working principle of Kyoto Protocol is common but differentiated responsibilities. The principle states that not every party has the similar capability in dealing climate change as from the economics aspect. Therefore, developed countries are given the responsibility in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, due to the fact that they are the main contributors in the topic. In this agreement, Kyoto units are used in measuring the allowable greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. Each party is given with an initial Kyoto unit, known as assigned amount units, and they are given the flexibility in controlling their assigned amount based on several Kyoto mechanisms to meet their respective commitment. The first mechanism is the emissions trading. Parties are allowed to trade among each other for the Kyoto units. However, the parties are to comply with the Parties Commitment Period Reserve, CPR, in which each party must hold a minimum level of units to prevent the disablement of individual capability in fulfilling the commitment. For an example, country A and B both has 200 Kyoto units as basis. At the end of year, it was recorded that country A exceeds the allowable units by 10 and country B only used 150 units. The CPR is set at the value of 180 units. Country A is allowed to trade with country B for the redundant units. After a successful trading, the maximum allowable emissions of country A increase to 220 units, where else country B is 180 units. Moving on to next mechanism, joint implementation allows Annex I party to invest in another Annex I party in promoting the emissions reduction project, which acts as an alternative in reduce emissions domestically. The projects have to be documented and reported to the Secretariat. Credits will be awarded in the form of emission reduction units ERU for successful emission reduction. ERU are converted from the assigned amount units of the host country. The last mechanism in protocol is Clean Development Mechanism, in which Annex I parties invest in the non-Annex I parties for emission reduction or reforestation projects. Certified emission reductions are generated as new Kyoto units, which can be used in emissions trading scheme. The intentions of Clean Development Mechanism are to assist Annex I parties to achieve their respective commitments, as well as assisting the non-Annex I parties in combating climate change. With all these mechanisms, does Kyoto Protocol succeed in achieving its ultimate goal? Let's check out what has been explained by the expert. Professor Steve Rayner from Oxford University concluded that Kyoto Protocol failed to accomplish its goal. He further explained the situation with three analogies. The first misleading is the handling of ozone depletion caused by chlorofluorocarbons (CFC). There are readily available substitute to deal with CFC. However, it only helps in reducing small amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Secondly, sulfur trading program in United States. The program succeeded in reducing sulfur emissions from coal-fired plant, but the program only targets sulfur dioxide with small number of traders. The process does not apply in dealing climate change. Lastly, Arms Reduction Treaty. The treaty focuses on reduction of nuclear warhead to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the monitoring process is extremely difficult to be carried out. Professor Steve concluded his opinions with this sentence.
So although these analogies seem to be very promising and to provide a way forward, I think that they have actually misled us quite significantly into wasting the last 10 to 15 years.
And so, in 2015, the Paris Agreement was set out to improve upon and replace Kyoto Protocol. The Paris Agreement has been signed by 197 countries, and entered into force on 4th of November 2016, with the aim of keeping the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, recognizing that this would substantially reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. Under this agreement, each country must determine, plan, and regularly report on the contribution that it undertakes to mitigate global warming. No mechanism forces a country to set a specific emissions target by a specific date, but each target should go beyond previously set targets. This should be done by reducing emissions as soon as possible, to achieve a balance between anthropogenic emissions by sources and removals by sinks of greenhouse gases in the second half of the 21st century. It also aims to increase the ability of parties to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change, and make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions, and climate-resilient development. The specific climate goals are thus politically encouraged, rather than legally bound. Countries incur no penalties for falling short of their proposed targets. This is literally just a giant, global, pinky promise. Considering the fact that the nations don't actually need to do anything specific in any specific time, Paris Agreement actually interested world leaders. Let's see what politicians and experts thought about climate change and Paris Agreement.
The Paris Agreement changes everything for the global response.
The Paris Agreement embodies. History may well judge it as a turning point for our planet.
I'm talking here about tens of billions of dollars of investments in renewables, clean tech, and efficiency that Alberta has now opened the door to.
By polluting the oceans, not mitigating CO2 emissions, and destroying our biodiversity, we are killing our planet. Let us face it. There is no planet B.
Our ability to successfully address climate change problem will determine the quality of life for all people on the planet, economic growth, and sustainable social development.
Seems like Paris Agreement is a powerful signal of hope for a world where conflicts, humanitarian crisis, and pessimism about economic prospects persist. However, in June 2017, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, announced his intention to withdraw the states from the agreement. Here is what President Trump talked about in the Rose Garden speech.
This agreement is less about the climate and more about other countries gaining a financial advantage over the United States. The Paris Accord is very unfair at the highest level to the United States. Compliance with the terms of the Paris Accord and the onerous energy restrictions that is placed on the United States could cost America as much as 2.7 million lost jobs by 2025. The agreement is a massive redistribution of United States wealth to other countries.
Is that true? Remember that there is no mechanism forces a country to set a specific emissions target by a specific date. The decision was made purely based on the country. President Trump spent almost 28 minutes of his Rose Garden speech talking about economics. Does saving the earth really kill jobs? Is securing the current industries really more urgent than saving the climate change?
Going to be our future, a clean energy future. It opens up the floodgates for businesses and scientists and engineers to unleash high-tech, low-carbon investment and innovation at a scale that we've never seen before. So this gives us the best possible shot to save the one planet we've got.
There's a huge economic opportunity when it comes to clean technologies and innovation.
Some people think that securing current industries and their jobs is more urgent than transforming our economies to meet the global challenge of climate change. But we must find a smooth transition to a low-carbon economy.
Meanwhile, President Trump has better idea and understanding on climate change.
We want the cleanest air, we want crystal clean water, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we're working on so hard.
It's coming back. Clean coal is coming back. 100%. What the EPA has done to our energy and done to our coal industry is ridiculous. We sell coal, the coal mines are dying, but the only coal we give is coal to China. Do you think they clean the coal? Believe me, they don't.
Donald Trump loves clean coal. I love clean coal. Obama has decimated the coal industry, decimated it. And we're going to bring the coal industry back, folks. We're going to bring it back. We're sending our coal over to China, and they're using our coal, but we can't use it. They're not cleaning our coal. They're putting it out any way they want.
I'm somebody that believes in clean coal. If you look at what's happened to your coal industry, folks, we're going to bring it back, okay? We're going to bring it back. Clean coal. We are going to lift the restrictions on shale, oil, natural gas, clean coal, and all forms of job-producing American energy.
There is a thing called clean coal. Coal will last for 1,000 years in this country.
We've ended the war on beautiful clean coal, and it's just been announced that a second brand new coal mine where they're going to take out clean coal, meaning they're taking out coal, they're going to clean it.
Seriously? Like shining a shoe? He clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. You might say US action of pulling out from Paris Agreement won't stop other countries from fighting climate change. But, US as one of the largest greenhouse gas emission countries, will intensify the global warming after withdrawal from Paris Agreement, putting the world under greater ecological vulnerability and climate risk. The United States withdrawal from the agreement is a heavy blow to global efforts against climate change. It will make the consequences of global warming more disastrous. In short, this is just an ecological debt that President Trump refused to pay, which is what he has been practicing his whole life. Paris Agreement is never enough, even if every country give full commitment. But, this is a great first step and the only hope that limits the continuous greenhouse gas emission. We actually know about what has been done by climate change to the Earth. However, most of us do not take this issue seriously, resulting in the worse and worse of global health. Looking from the psychology aspect, when a person gets guiltful and fearful about something, he or she tends to get rid of it and throw the responsibility to others. This concept shouldn't be held on to. When something is too discomfort to look at, we do not just look away. We, as part of the community, have to do something. Paris Agreement is our only hope to delay the disastrous impacts of climate change. Before the end of this video, I would like to use the phrase, penny and penny laid up to be many. The accumulation of our little contributions can create a big picture in fighting climate change. Let's together make our planet great again.